Good evening. You're listening live to the Xtreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob. Alongside me tonight on a special Christmas presentation of Holiday Affairs starring Robert Mitchum, I have RDV from the Great Midwest and a special guest star, one of our longtime listeners, longtime loyalists, a great man, a wonderful human being, Eric Brain. Good evening, gentlemen. How are we tonight?
Doing well.
Nice. All right, so we've been doing some Christmas movies, some good, some bad, some notwithstanding. And I, on the panel, am probably the one that's not the biggest in the Christmas films. But that being said, I'm a huge Robert Mitchum fan. He, to me, is somebody that has just this natural born charisma, whether you think he can act or not. I put him upside there with like Bogart and others, where when he's on screen, I want to see him. So we have Holiday Affair, and to me, I'll start off with my initial thoughts by saying this and pass it around. Like many Christmas films, so-called Christmas films, this is not a Christmas film. It has nothing to do with Christmas. It's just a backdrop for it. This is a lot different than a lot of real schmaltzy Christmas type films in that these are heavy duty relationships that we watching this as adults see early on. And even though I think Timmy's not bad in this movie, he gets a lot of screen time. It was interesting to see how this played out because this did not seem like one of these happy Hallmark type things. It's an interesting film to me. It's certainly not lighthearted, I think. And I think that a lot of people who have reviewed it say that, oh, it's just a wonderful romantic film. And I see nothing romantic about it at all. I think it's very gritty and realistic in the human sense. And being about 70 years old, I think that says a lot for it. Now, RDV, I don't know if this is a first watch for you or not. We do sometimes have those on our Extreme Classics, which I would classify this as. Was this a first watch for you? And what are your initial thoughts?
This is probably like my 14th time. Been watching it since since I was little. I thought it was a really good movie. It takes place during during Christmas. It is kind of more realistic, because the romance dramas were heavy in the 40s. I think Timmy steals the whole entire show. He's like the star. Everyone else is in there. Robert Mitchum in it, but Timmy is like what carries everything. His reaction from finding the present there and realizing it's not for him, and he's kind of depressed. You see that, and then his wife or his mom, is just marrying a guy because she wants to have a stable life where she's not really marrying for love, and she kind of realizes that, and then she meets the guy at the store, actually lost his job because of her. And he actually honestly cares about her and the kid, where the other guy, Carl, doesn't really. He's just, he's not really into her as she thinks he is. So, and it's basically turns out where she has to choose. So, between two guys, and she chooses correctly at the end. But I'll let Breen go. Breen, I think
allegedly, but probably rightly.
Yeah,
she chases the feels definitely about it.
Breen, what do you think about this? Is this one of your top
Eric,
three?
what's your take on this? I know you're a big movie buff.
Yeah, this is my favorite Christmas movie. I'm not one of those guys that, I know that the debate goes back and forth whether things are Christmas movies or not. I think enough of this takes place at Christmas to qualify as one, but that's neither here nor there. What I liked about the movie was, you're used to seeing Robert Mitchum play a certain type of character. And when he breaks from that in movies like His Kind of Woman and this, you get to see a different side of him. But even more, someone playing against type was Wendell Corey. He was always the heavy or the other guy, like in movies where, I'm sure he probably died in more than half the movies he was in.
Right.
It was nice to see him play a genuinely nice guy. Now, I do disagree with the good doctor here. He genuinely loved Connie and Timmy, and he was in love with with her and loved the kid, because remember, there's a scene where he goes, "I can be one of two kinds of husbands. I can be the guy who's nice to the kid, blah blah blah, or I can be the one that disciplines him, this and this, and love. So I'll love him either way, but I either can be the father or the stepfather." And the difference was, she did not love him. She was in love with the idea of the stability of him, but she had to get past the ghost of her dead husband. And that's where, when Steve Mason enters the picture, he does in one afternoon what Carl Davis had been able to do in 2 years. He starts to break down those defenses. And
I think
it's
that's well
really,
said. And when I mentioned before about this being kind of a heavy duty relationships, you know, we're used to seeing where if a woman's in a relationship and she's not going to be with a guy, and then whatever the drama is that prevents her from being with the love of her life, the feels guy, whatever you want to call it, usually as an audience member, I think we're given at least some very easy, superficial excuses as to why she shouldn't be with him. So she doesn't have to take the responsibility of acknowledging that. You know, the guy did something wrong on a drunken spree with his buddies. He lost his job, just whatever it is. But you're absolutely right. And that's what early on, once we start seeing a couple scenes with him in here, that it's like, you know what? When we say nice guy as men, we usually typically say that, well, that's like almost an insult because it means you're going to be railroaded by a woman, you're dull, you're boring, you know, she's not going to want to be with you because she's not getting that bad boy excitement. But he is a very good man. He's a good catch. He's not a jerk at all. It's not like he's messing with her and like hates the kid and is putting on an act or whatever. And that's what makes this film really stand out, is that you're absolutely right. He really, especially in that day and age, the late 40s after wartime, an older gentleman who's successful in this field that does not seem like he has a very big ego, seems very, very genuine about it. And there's another scene towards the end of the movie I'll point out in a little while that I think summed it up best. It made me go, okay, he recovered great from being just another nice, easy, soft guy too. But RDV, I wanted to point out to you that you mentioned Timmy kind of stole the show here in the movie with his acting. It felt like to me we got a lot of kid scenes that were like, yeah, this is the scene where the kid does X, Y, Z or says it this way. But then sometimes I felt like the camera lingered on him and we just kind of caught him and they just like let it roll as you were. And I agree with you. I think probably going down in terms of children in movies, his was probably one of the most least nauseating performances of kids in movies. So talk a little bit more about what you liked about with Timmy.
Timmy in the beginning, when his mom comes home, and like how he dresses his mom, because he addresses her as her name, and she dresses him, as Mister, and like and this the whole rapport they have, back and forth, it's kind of a playful attitude. She brings home the present, and he's like he sees eyes light up because he's like it's like, is it for me? And she's like, no, it's not for you, and because all she was supposed to, there was a train she was supposed to take to her boss the next day. It wasn't for him at all because she basically she's a like a spy, basically, would you say, like the corporate spies, what they use them for comparing prices. That's what caused because it caused Robert Mitchum his job, because he pegged her, but he felt bad for her, and then especially he found out she's a war widow and stuff, the kid, he basically
Yeah.
out of kindness of heart let her return it. It cost him his job. And then they have a nice little scene there. But Timmy though, when she brought it home, she went in. She went to go do stuff, and he's go wash up, and he does what every little boy would do at that age, on Christmas. Pretends to wash up, takes his shirt off. He's got a little thing, washed his face, and then pretends to wash his face, and then quickly turns the water off, runs in the other room, pulls the ribbon off, opens the box, and he's like, "Oh my gosh!" And he's like, his reaction when he sees the train, he's like, "I've been waiting for this for months," And then he hears like she's calling for him. He's like quick panics, it's like, oh crap, I don't want to get caught. So he puts it back in there, and then then she manages to trip, which delays her as he quick runs out, and he's like, I'm right here, mom, just drying my face off. It's just everything with Timmy. Even later on with him and Robert Mitchum, when his mom wants to return the train set and all that stuff, I said, this was no cheesy kid, gimmick, like Home Alone or like this. This was like an actual getting legitimate acting role part. So he was kind of like a little young adult, as far as throughout the movie. And I like that. And yeah, I'm pretty much, I don't know what else to say about it. And then the fact that, he's the little guy. He's like a little adult.
He is. He's like a little man, and I do like how he has some heart to hearts with his mom about certain things. And then when Mitchum comes in and they have their little conversations, it's pretty striking how, safe lawyer guy talks to him a little bit and wants to love him and all that. But kids, you can't fool kids even if they don't use 50-cent words. He basically tells his mom, yeah, but you don't really love him, he's kind of boring. He all basically says that. But when he's in there with Robert Mitchum, who we don't know whether or not he likes kids, but
Mhm.
they just seem like they have a natural chemistry together. You're like, wow, either that's the strength of Mitchum's acting, or something with his kid, because they have such good on-screen chemistry that you're like, well, naturally you would think he's the father, because the kid's actually well behaved, and she, despite being a widowed single mom, seems to be fairly responsible about things too. So I don't want to bang on her too hard. They seem like they're a very well-to-do family as far as doing things good and not being bums or being angry. They're just working hard and trying to make a living. And the thing about Robert Mitchum, you almost get the idea that he's like, not just a fly by night kind of guy, but he's got a dream. He's chasing it. He has a plan for it, and he explains it to her. And he doesn't
Mhm.
seem phased at all that because he did the right thing by letting her go in his mind, and he got fired for it, that things will still work out. He has a faith and belief in himself, which he says, and he doesn't make it a big deal. And I think that that's something that really attracts her too, because he has a vision and he executes it. So he's in a different place in his life on that job life S curve, where he's trying to move up the chain, whereas the slightly older gentleman who's well established in his career as a lawyer has already gone through that spike there too. So I just found a little interesting that nothing's really mentioned about how the fact that she seems to be a lot younger than the lawyer as far as that relationship. And not that that matters, I think, to anybody in relationships, but it definitely seemed like it was a noticeable difference compared to Mitchum's character too. Now, Eric, you mentioned this is one of your favorite Christmas movies of all time, if not one of the favorites. What made it that way for you?
I think the first time I watched it, I don't know that I had that, the feeling that I have for it now, but I watched it a second time and I realized, this is a lot of fun. There is more to it. And I think one of the things, the reason why I like older movies in general is movies that were made smack dab in the middle of the Hays Code had to work harder
Yes.
because there were so many things you couldn't do. And this, the every character from, like I said, Mitchum against type, but just kind of like breezing through the movie. Janet Leigh, who was only really 2 years into her career, and I think the movie she made before this was with I think the main character was a lion. I can't remember the name of the movie, but yeah, and again, like I said, Wendell Corey not playing a heavy. It was just watching these people play against type. And you're right about Timmy, um, that kid. I mean, there's so many things in that movie that are just so realistic. From being because when I was a kid, we had more conveyances than they did, but you didn't he couldn't run into his room and go onto the internet. I mean, the kids, so much of their lives were in their imagination, and like, so for someone thinking they're getting a train set, it'd be like, it'd be like the ultimate Christmas gift. And
Yeah.
then the disappointment, the way he reacts to it, and then
Mhm.
doesn't believe it, and then when he delivers the train, and the when he jumps on his mom on Christmas morning, it's
Yeah.
believable. And yeah, I would say that, jumping ahead a little bit later in the movie, he had a line in there that was just kind of summed up what made this movie great. Was he goes, "Mom, if you marry Carl, you won't be Mrs. Ennis anymore."
Yeah.
And given how much of a part of the movie that interplay back and forth was, that was really that just, like I said,
Yeah.
that just, no, there's just so much to like in this movie. I mean, I watch it every year, and I said, I just, and each time I, like it a little bit more.
As a teenager growing up in the '80s and having older parents, I grew accustomed to watching a lot of older movies as a teenager, which I thought was great. I think obviously anybody that watched cartoons, you got to see like Bogart and a few others that kind of re-imaged and repurposed, like in Bugs Bunny and whatever. But also the thing with Robert Mitchum, even though I think he died in the mid to late 90s, he still was around on TV a bit more. And we've talked about before here on the Xtreme Movie Show how the 70s is a very interesting decade, because then you started to not only have different directors coming out with different ways of putting stuff on film that really hadn't been done before due to the Hays Code and other things, and just society in general, that it was seemed to be okay for people of the older generation that were working in films to be on TV. And Mitchum, he liked to drink, he liked to smoke a little dope here and there. So the story roughly is that he got busted, and so he got in a cut and said, hey, you got to go make this movie, and it'll be against type or whatever, but it'll help rehab your image or whatever. And I just remember as a kid watching him, I first saw him in playing Philip Marlowe. And I always go, wait a minute, I thought Humphrey Bogart was Philip Marlowe or Sam Spade or these detective guys. And it was so neat as a kid, because these movies were not shown a lot on the big three channels, that when they did come on, you were intensely focused on watching them and trying to separate, oh, this is the guy, Bogey, that smokes and has that mouth thing going on. And then Cagney's the guy that sounds like this. And Mitchum's the guy that looks like he's high all the time, but he's still, like everybody else that we just mentioned, has this great charisma that we see him on screen, that he doesn't have to act like a heavy. He doesn't have to overdo it. He can just, his presence alone and the way his face looks, he does more with less. That I put him up there, not with Bogart, who I think is very dynamic, but somebody like a Steve McQueen, who might like a physical actor, is the way I like to think of him. But McQueen can do a lot just by looking at his face, right? And so that's one of the things about this movie I think is great too, is that despite the initial pain, I think, of the situation of like, oh my God, she doesn't love this guy, and it's been 2 years. Why is he hanging around her? He's a successful lawyer, and getting over the initial anger of all that, you realize, like I said, he's a really good guy. Timmy does a fantastic job in here, and he gets a ton of screen time. And then you go, yeah, Mitchum's going to be Mitchum and this and that. But Mitchum, I don't know. There was a scene in this movie, and I wanted to ask you guys what you thought about it, that really just blew my mind. And Carl, the lawyer, he's being a good guy. He's trying to be as supportive as possible without being railroaded. And Mitchum's trying to be somewhat noble about it. And really, it's because of her that things happen, not because of Mitchum, which I think is very good and realistic. But it's what I call the dinner scene. And that's where they're sitting down at the table, and I think her parents are there, and both men are there, the way the situation works out. And then Robert Mitchum, as they're all talking, I can't remember off the top of my head, is if he's wearing the tie that she had bought for Carl and not for him, but gave it to him, just the way things were going. But he basically made a comment, and he's just like, yeah. Then he stands up and he goes, but I think you should marry me. And you go, wow, what balls on this guy, what arrogance, what an asshole, what a Chad, what a douchebag, what a dude, bro. But when you're watching this movie from the start, and the way the performances are with the two men in here, I was floored, because I was like, wow, they did this and got away with it, because I think that's not something you can really do and do easily. The big speech where you try to appeal emotionally to everybody, so that, nope, Mitchum's just basically saying what he's saying, and that's what he believes, and that's it. And I'm like, damn it, that's so friggin' good how he pulls that off. But to me, that was the scene of the movie. What was your guys' take on that, or whatever scene you thought was really intense?
Well, I guess you want me to go first, Eric, or do you want to?
Yeah, sure.
I thought that was actually, I agree with Rob. That was kind of ballsy that they actually did that in a movie. But the fact that he said, you should marry me, but and all that stuff. But he's like, yeah. Later on, he actually said, it's like, I can't compete, with a dead man. You're still in love with your husband who's dead. It's like it's be rude for me to try to compete with that. You're not marrying for their love. You're marrying for stability, which Rob had said earlier in this stream. So I like that he's respectable, and he goes, he's like, don't worry about me. I got a train. I'm gonna head west, and I got another job lined up. Don't worry about me. So he goes to stay at the little, like, I guess the shelter thing until he gets ready to leave. So I like that Robert Mitchum just plays the wholesome guy, kind of like a Gregory Peck role, like in To Kill a Mockingbird. So it's a different, because we've usually seen him in, like, as far as Robert Mitchum, he's always like in the Western movies, you know, or the war movies. So seeing him like in a lighthearted role like this, it's really cool. But I'll let Breen reply back too.
Eric, what about you with what you're seeing?
Well, one thing, the dinner scene that you were referring to, those are her dead husband's parents, which to me added an extra layer of dynamicism to the scene. That they were still close, and even when Carl is making his proclamation, he says, "And I'm going to gain, in-laws," which I thought was really interesting. Yeah, that's. And they seem to be going along with it because they were genuinely happy for their technically ex-daughter-in-law. But the scene that the scene I want to talk about is the scene at the police station. For only having one scene, Harry Morgan just chewed up that scenery, like nobody's business. That scene was that. In a movie that was billed as a romantic comedy, there weren't a whole lot of laughs other than that scene. I mean, I still laughed out loud a couple times in that scene.
That was the only part that you catch your breath, because I agree with you totally. And I hate it when someone says, "Oh, it's a romantic comedy." Well, somebody having to choose between multiple lovers for something that might be a really big deal, and then throw in something that's supposed to be a special day, whether it's Valentine's Day or Christmas or whatever day it is, or some significance, that's not very funny. But that one scene was just a little lighthearted to kind of see where she would stand with things too. Backstage and now on stage with us tonight, we have Eglantine from I Love Comics. Bro, give it to me. What's going on?
So the first time I saw this movie, which shock surprise because I'm usually the guy who sees everything, was last night. I've never seen it before. Gail and I watched it, and I do believe it is a romantic comedy, but it is not a farcical one. Occasionally you can have one. Not all romantic comedy Christmas movies have to be Love Actually, where they go over the top or anything. I do agree with you. One of the best speeches in any romantic film, be it a Christmas movie or whatever, comedy, drama, was Robert Mitchum. And he just stood up and he says, "Well, here's the thing. These are the facts of the case. No hard feelings. You made your choice. Have a good day." Because he knew what he was getting into. He knew that he was the interloper into this particular relationship, but he also saw the flaws in the cloth. So I really was entertained by that particular aspect. Overall, I thought the movie was good. Eric, you mentioned it was one of your favorites, not one of my favorites of the classic films, but I enjoyed the characters. I gotta tell you though, Timmy, I thought at the very beginning, oh, this is gonna be one of those precocious yell actors. Get these kids in the 1940s. Cringy. "Oh, hey, Mr. Bill, gonna go over to the thing," and they're just shouting out their lines. And I thought Timmy was gonna be like that, and he was, but
"Buy a paper, mister."
Yeah, it was part of the appeal. So by the end, I actually liked the character of Timmy just as much as I did any of the adults of the movie. Especially, of course, when he goes and he takes his toy train to get the money for Robert Mitchum. I don't know. This might be sort of a Pretty in Pink situation where she was with the wrong guy. I mean, Robert Mitchum, for as stand-up as he was, stood up and said, "I offer you nothing. You should marry me." And there's an old formula to romantic comedies where you have somebody who's already in a couple, and then here comes the third, and either the man or the woman of this couple kind of look over, and they never really get into why the original couple was a couple. So yes, it's so easy to follow. "Oh, no, the new romance, the hot passion romance, that's what's good for you now." But the two that were the couple have already passed that phase and they're still together. So there is something to save there. So it did fall into that trap, but overall, good, solid film.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing too, is that, like Maranya mentioned here in chat about, it was commonplace for older men, younger women, and certainly nothing wrong with that. Both gain considerably from that. But I think your point about Well, they've been a couple for about 2 years. He does love her, and he kind of knows that she's trying to do it. And it took me a while to realize, hey, this guy's playing really, really good, rather than just being a has-been. Let's just wait to fall into Richard or into his arms. But it was like I felt like he understood her with what she was going through with her, being a widow. And I thought, God, this guy's he's a good guy, not a nice guy. And we all know that. I had mentioned earlier before he popped in there's a difference. So I thought, gosh, how is he going to handle Mitchum? And I thought he did it with a little bit of class, which early on be like, bro, you can't have other men come to your house. That's just like rule 101, period. Doesn't matter if you're not home, no man shows up. Women, you don't go to other men's house. You just don't allow, you respect the other person enough not to put people in situations where things can happen. And I don't know if it was a happy movie, because when you say, oh, he stood up and basically says, well, I offer you nothing, but you should marry me. Part of me, the fact check part of you goes, well, wait a minute, it's been 4 days. She already gave the tie that was Carl's. It's going to happen. So how's this going to go? We don't really know, or probably, at least me, I didn't care if it was going to work out because the movie ends, and that's the reality of it.
If you get past the romance of it, and I'm sure Eric wants to slap me right now for talking about this part of it, but if you get past the romance,
I don't see any romance in this movie at all. I just see it where she goes, hey, I just have a natural chemistry and I want to pursue it. And she finally got over the ghost of her.
I think that she was trying to find a reason to get out of the relationship, and Robert Mitchum was the excuse. Is the Robert Mitchum relationship going to last? Probably not, but that's after credits. That's the ending you can add to yourself. And if you want the happily ever after, have the happily ever after. But this is one of the reasons why, while I enjoyed the film, I don't, and I think it's good. It's solid. I don't think it's a Christmas great. That being said, Eric and I, and I'm just going to mention this briefly because I don't want to derail the conversation. We were talking about another movie. It happened on Fifth Avenue, which I found far more entertaining. I like that one a little bit better. So of the two that Eric had recommended to me, I'll go there.
Well, let's do this. Let's talk a little bit about something a little lighthearted, because like I said before, I would describe this as heavy duty on relationships. I really, really love the adult nature to this rather than the watered down, let's take it easy approach to holiday films and the format and all that too. RDV, you mentioned to me something about trains. I'm like, okay, a kid's going to play with the damn train in this movie. Holy crap, what a nice little train set. The way to end the movie was $100 train, which back then might be $1,000 now.
I know, right? When I heard 7980, I'm like, in 1940?
Yeah.
My dad has that. My dad has the exact same train set.
Really?
Yeah. Yep.
Wow.
Yep. Got it back in
the... I just...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It was actually... It's pretty much exact. I don't say it's exact, but it's pretty much similar, very similar to that. My dad was born in '54, but he his dad had that train set, so it was a handed down thing. So we have it, I
just Googled it, $922. It would close. Be a $1,000 train set. Yeah, that's pretty expensive.
I'm tempted to play with the train set, but I don't want to decrease the value.
There you go.
I will admit this about the trains. Okay, so like my father was, older, and I was a teenager in the 80s, so I actually had a train set that I think he had. And what I remember about it was a couple of things. One, it was really friggin' heavy. It was not like whatever train sets were coming out at the time, back in the 70s and 80s that were probably maybe more plastic. This thing, you could kill small game with it easily. It was indestructible. But I also remember to this day that it had like a little special thing where if you put a few drops of like water in it or something like that, it would heat up and you'd get the steam as it was chugging along. Yeah, and I just thought that was the coolest thing when I was like 5-6 years older or whatever, mess with it too. And we had, of course, the big table with everything set up. But the thing that I'm gonna just go, maybe I'm missing something obvious. One, this is one of the earliest movies that I see where people are decorating our tree, which I thought was kind of cool because you get to see that a bit. But two, why the hell aren't we talking about the damn seals in Central Park? I'm like, what the hell?
I was waiting for that because I was going to say the setting.
If there was a park here in Central Florida that had seals, I would go.
Yeah. I was wondering, like, I'm like, where in New York is Central Park? Are there seals? But it's the 40s. Maybe things changed back
Yeah,
then.
and Rob, turns out he did become a bank president.
Yeah.
Timmy
I love
on
the seal.
Trial, the sequel.
When I first watched this, I said, like, why is there seals in are there in Central Park? Where the seals come from? Like, well, maybe that's why there's no more seals anymore. They froze to death. They're in the middle of winter in New York. It's but like I said, like, when you bring animal humor or any animals, like especially like seals, into a movie, I think it kind of like can make the scene a lot better than what would be normally used to be a boring scene. So bringing the seal in there and doing the little joke and stuff, it really helped it out a lot too. But yeah, like even again at the park scene where he's giving the guy, like the homeless man, and giving the tie and stuff. I just love the whole scenery, the background scenery and stuff. I said, there's a scene there where like they're just pouring this, they're having the cereal, and he's using the little carton, for the milk and stuff like that. It's like stuff like that. It's just little culture differences. Like, everything has changed now. It's cool to see, go back and see how they live back then, like, and how, because we're still technically advanced in certain things, but it's like some things are just still the same.
Cornflakes.
Yep, cornflakes.
Yeah, because we talked about that when we did the Dirty Harry sequence, about how you could see and watch San Francisco evolve and film the way they chose to shot it, a lot of the landmarks and backdrops in similar places. And of course, we mentioned in Dark Passage how we saw it back then too. But Eric, you'd mentioned before about the Hays Code and all that too, and you made a comment that I think we don't really talk about a lot, as far as, they had to try a lot harder too, because in those scenes there, it's obviously just a simple big set scene or whatever, it looked like a real seal and everything was going on, but they had all the ambient music going on of what's going on in the city soundscapes and everything there too. But it does seem like there's little touches like that were put into it that were not distracting, but I think added to it at all.
Mm-hmm.
Did anything else pop up with you about this movie that you wanted to mention?
I said one scene I do think is worth mentioning. I thought it was kind of clever when Carl turns the breakup into the summation of a mock trial. I thought that was kind of fitting for his character, and you realize that he was okay with it because he kind of realized, I think at that moment, that he's not surprised by the outcome.
He took it like a man.
Yeah, and when he says, maybe somewhere out there's a woman who might actually be in love with me, even if she is a frowsy blonde, or whatever the term was he used. And I thought that, I said, it just, again, it was hard not to like that character. And I said, when you have two people going against each other, fighting over the same thing, and there are no bad guys, it's a challenge to make, neither one come off as a dick, and neither one come across as a wuss. And I think this movie succeeded there.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. That's what made the movie for me. We just recently did We're No Angels with Humphrey Bogart, Ustinov, and Aldo Ray, I think is his name. Yeah. And I was surprised by that too, because that's a little bit more lighthearted as far as having comedy in it with some physical scenes and whatnot too. But this is a vastly different film, and entertained wise, I don't know what people necessarily look for, expect to have in a holiday movie, but I like the fact that this had to deal with relationships, which I do think make it a step above a lot of your typical, everything's going to be all right in the end sort of Christmassy type movies. That kind of stuff just wears on me, and it's just low bearing fruit, I think, on the tree here. And I do feel like they reach for something a little bit more, and I think that they were successful in it too. Let's do this. Let's go around for any final thoughts and observations. E, let's start with you, since you just joined us a few minutes ago here too, and it was your first watch. I'll give you a little thing here, E. It was my first watch today. I watched it this morning, and I was like, wow. And I just sat down, and I thought I would just have it on while doing chores. And I said, no, I got drawn in and sat down and watched it nonstop. What's your take on this movie? Any final thoughts and observations?
Like as I said, I liked it. I didn't think it. For me, it's not going to be one of the great classics. I do like it. I think it's a good, solid film, but I'm not sure this is going to make the rotation like as far as the older ones. Miracle on 34th Street is my favorite film of the black and whites and everything. I had a hard time with Robert Mitchum. great actor. I think I just didn't feel that Christmas feel from it. Like if I watch, say, Cary Grant and Bishop's Wife. Cary Grant, we talked about this, Eric. It's one of the most charming actors, if not the most charming actor ever to be on the silver screen. I don't think that Robert Mitchum has that. I don't, and that was one of the things that kind of hit the wall. I love the fact, as you've mentioned, that they didn't make the guy she was with a jerk, which is what they do in a lot of modern films. We're a couple, yeah, but you can't really tell why these two people are a couple because they always make the guy the jerk or the girl the jerk. Whoever's about to leave, the other one is not really right for him. And I'm very happy that they didn't do that because, as you said, it adds a maturity to the story. It's a more believable story because of it. So for me, there's some good, there's some bad. Take them both. There you have the.
Don't do it. You did it.
Don't do it.
There, I went there, sir. Yeah, it's absolutely fine.
Now smack yourself for me.
Nope, not going to happen. I'm going to stand by my opinion.
Eric,
on this.
what about you?
No. Just the facts of lifeline. Just smack yourself
Okay.
for that. Thank you.
There you go.
Okay. I said, yeah, I don't know what makes certain movies resonate a certain way for certain people. I said, like for me, this is the top of my rotation. I don't know what it has what it has for me that doesn't have for E necessarily, but and Rob, you mentioned something about he doesn't have a Bogart level charisma or presence, and he doesn't have, and to E's point, he doesn't have Cary Grant's charm. But I think Mitchum is right below both of them in both of those. It's maybe not so much a charm or just a presence that, like I said, Mitchum just breezes through every movie he was ever in, except for the Friends of Eddie Coyle. That one's hard to watch, but I digress. And it's just, like I said, just a movie where you like every character except for the guy that fired him. Boy, he just exuded prickishness.
He did.
Yeah, he did.
But all the characters that you were supposed to like, you did. The kid who, like I said, could have easily lapsed into, you want him to fall down in the well and have Lassie not come after him.
Oh, he was on the edge, but I think he was perfect at that particular role.
Yeah, and like I said, Janet Leigh was very good in this. It worked. It just it's just a fun movie that I said I watch every year and enjoy every year.
Yeah, it's I'm glad we chose to do that because I know RDV, you'd given me the recommendation about checking it out, and so I researched. I was like, yeah, let's give it a shot because unlike E, most of those schmaltzy, guilt-ridden movies about Christmas and all that stuff, I can't stand or stomach. I think, like I say, I've mentioned low-bearing fruit, generally speaking, and they'll have their pluses and minuses too. But I think the whole, like I said, idea for relationships for me really make it. And if it didn't have Robert Mitchum, had somebody else in it, I don't know how it would turn out. Maybe it would go that way, but I do think because of how he is, the way you described, really adds a lot to it. RDV,
Well,
what final thoughts do you have?
Final thoughts. Well, I said I like this movie more than some of the other ones. Like Miracle on 34th Street, I cannot get through that movie. This is more, I guess, less Santa-y, and it's more realistic. It takes place during Christmas. It's not exactly, I agree, it's not really a Christmas movie, but it takes place right around Christmas. And I think it's a good movie, regardless. I can watch it during Christmas. I can watch it during the middle of July, whatever I want to. And most people could look at some of these movies like, well, it's an old romance movie. It's like, why want to watch that? It's like 40s romance movies are not your 90s or your 80s, cheesy, weird ones. These are actually legitimate good stories. And
Well, sorry.
I want to say I thought this was a great movie. I discovered it on Turner Classic Movies, and I watch it every year now. But I also want to point out that little Timmy is 80 years old. He's the one to let the light on.
right?
I was telling people at work that day. Rob, do you mind if I say one more thing?
Sure, go ahead.
I said, when we go back and forth the debate between Christmas movies or not Christmas movies, How about the term holiday movies? Because when you look at a movie like this,
It's called holiday, not Christmas.
this movie like this, it happened on Fifth Avenue, The Apartment, they take place through Christmas into the new year, and both holidays play prominently in the movie. So I said, I kind of look at that as more of a, like I said, a holiday movie.
Yeah, and we've not had the big debate on Christmas movies and stuff, because Christmas movies should be, a movie about Christmas, which has to do with Christ and religion and some examination of what that may mean to somebody or people or whatever. And the story should be based without it. If you take it out, it can't exist. This could be a holiday. It could be Valentine's Day. It could be 4th of July and a summer picnic, and you'd get the same vibe. So yeah, I can see where that's said too, and I think that does get loosely tossed around. But I think the fact that these older movies were, started to get shown in rotation a lot, that people just got used to calling that because it was thought of as just Christmas only, not holiday or whatever. But it's a legit point, and I totally agree with you.
Some people say if it takes place during the holiday or Christmas, whatever, it is that movie. It is a Christmas movie, and I'm okay with it. Well, I'm not going to argue with somebody who has their favorites. Obviously you have the movies you like to watch around Christmas time. We all do. And so I'm not going to argue with them, whether I agree or disagree with what you consider, because I call them non-Christmas Christmas movies, the ones that take place around there. But once again, you take the Christmas out of Die Hard, you put any other reason for him to get there, you got the same story. So it's a non-Christmas Christmas movie. But as far as Miracle on 34th Street is, absolutely about the holiday of Christmas, whether it's the religious aspect or the secular aspect. You remove Christmas from Miracle on 34th Street, and it doesn't work. So there are some that are legitimate Christmas films, but the thing is when it comes right down to it, you're going to make your own playlist, and you're going to have your favorites. And Eric Breen's is going to be topped by It Happened on Fifth Avenue, and mine will be topped by the Charlie Brown Christmas Special. So
yeah, I think I gravitate more towards holiday movies. I forgot to mention Bell, Book, and Candle.
Yeah,
I watch them. I watch all these right around this time. In fact, I'm going to watch Meet Me in St. Louis later tonight.
Watched it 2 days ago, and that is an awesome film. I love it, and would not mind talking about that sometime. A movie I watch, even though it has zero to do with holidays, I watch it every year around this time. Uncle Buck. There's nothing holiday, there's nothing Christmas, nothing like that about it, but I always watch it right around Christmas time. So I don't know why. So like I said,
well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Holiday Affair, Robert Mitchum. I want to thank RDV and Eric Breen, and of course Angleton for showing up tonight to talk about this movie. It's great when we have an opportunity like this to bring up some personal favorites, whether they're old or new, because we can have some different viewpoints about how we perceive a film, but talking about what we like about it, what's enjoyable, the magic that attracts us to it, I think is really what we try to find here on the Xtreme Movie Show too. Even if the movies kind of suck or bad or poorly written, sometimes you can find some gems in there too. So just remember that Enter the Ninja is the best ninja movie of all time. Check out that review. 1,000 views on Body Double, which was think's one of the better movies of the 80s. But we could go on, and that's what we cover here on the Xtreme Movie Show. So make sure that if you have any you'd like us to review, take a moment, let us know that. Check out the community tab. We're posting polls. We're trying to drive some more engagement on our march to being at 1,000 subs there too. So thanks everybody for listening. If we don't talk between now and Chris, I'd like to thank everybody for being a part of the Xtreme Movie Show. Have a happy holiday, as it were, and Merry Christmas, of course, to E, Eric, and RDV, and everybody else. Thank you for listening. Have a good night. Stay extreme.
Stay extreme.